So we're here with the town manager, Steve Fournier, and Steve has now been in Newmarket for 10 years. He's celebrating his 10-year anniversary, and so Katanna Conley, the chair or the vice chair of the town council, and myself, Toni Weinstein, the chair of the town council, came up with a list of questions to ask Steve about his time here in Newmarket. So our first question, Steve. What made you decide to go into town management?
So I've been involved in municipal government since I was in high school. I had friends who were running for city council in the community I grew up in Somersworth. And when I went to college at UNH, I thought I was going to be an attorney, and I had the political bug. So I ran for city council in Somersworth. I was 19 and I got elected, and at the age of 21 I was the deputy mayor of the city. And during that time, the city manager of Somersworth was molding me a little bit, saying, you know, this may not be the way you want to go. Have you ever thought about becoming a professional manager? And I talked to some other managers, and I really enjoyed working with local government from the beginning. So I switched and decided to become a public manager at that time.
And so when you came to Newmarket specifically, what were some of your first impressions of the town?
So I already knew the community because I had family who lived here before I came. I came from Northampton, New Hampshire, plus I'm native of the Seacoast, so I knew the community. And Newmarket was really a community that was changing itself. For many years, it was a beat-up old mill town that, you know, sort of, like a better term, backwater, that was on the other side of the bay, and people overlooked it between Exeter and Durham and the rest of the Seacoast. But beginning in the late 90s, the 2000s, the image started to change. The community started to change, and the way they looked at itself as well. The knowledge of the redevelopment of the downtown, the redevelopment of the mills, it was that the community itself was investing in itself. So that was an exciting aspect to come to, and knowing that they're willing to change to make the community a better place.
So as you know, we've said you've been here for 10 years. I'm sure that the town is very different, and the personnel are very different than when you first started. Who were some of the people who were here when you first started in Newmarket who helped you become acquainted with the town and the way we do things here?
The department heads really helped a lot. I've gone through a few department heads in different levels, but when I first started, it was the town clerk, tax collector Becky Benvenuti, the police chief Kevin Sear, and still fire chief, public works director Rick Mulaski really showed me how the community worked and got me to meet a lot of the people in the community. The council at the time helped. I had chair was Phil Nazaro when I first started, and it was really a good way to meet everybody. I also met with a lot of the business people, the business association at the time, and just different organizations in the community that really showed me the ins and outs of how things are done in Newmarket.
And so as you were kind of getting up and getting running, what were some of the early initiatives, or kind of the early kind of big things that you decided to tackle sort of as town manager?
So when I got here, there were a number of issues. There was a lack of trust in the government at that time because it was an issue with overexpending fund balance the year before to artificially lower the tax rate. And so in return, there had to be a number of cuts made to make that back up. So I knew I was getting into that when I got here. There was also a big discussion on a waste-to-energy plant that was in the community. Instead of having a new wastewater treatment facility, that was very divisive with the council. And a lot of those, and to be honest, those issues I had to deal with even before I started officially. I was already attending meetings and hearing things to get on the ground rolling. A lot of it was just trying to rebuild trust and show the facts and just put those items out there and say, look, this is the best way to do it. And this is what I would recommend. And I think those are the big two issues that we got. The first year we had the bond vote for the new wastewater treatment facility. And that was another situation where there was a group trying to do the waste to energy, then there was a group that was trying to fight the entire notion that we need a new plant. And at the end of the day, though, we had an aging infrastructure that needed to be replaced, and we had an opportunity for a number of grants to do so. And it was a no-brainer that we had to fix it. And I believe we won that bond vote by like 80%, which was very high at that time. So it was, again, got to thank Sean Gregg for all his work he's done upgrading the system and just providing the right information and trustworthy information. And that's the key.
Now, do you remember when you first started to see some of the fruits of the work that you've been doing to sort of rebuild that public trust? You remember like a win? You're like, yeah, it's going the right way now.
I do. I think one was that bond vote. I think it was a big part of it. I think the change in the attitude and the discussions at the council level and the community level, a lot of it was us versus them situation, no matter what side they were on, versus let's work together to get what's best for the community. There was just a lack of trust on any decision. There were some people who, if you said white, they would say black, no matter what happened. And you don't see that as much now. You see a lot more of the work being done beforehand and trying to come up to a logical solution versus just arguing over everything all the time. So I think that was a big thing. And I noticed that probably within the first year or so of being on the council. I mean, working for the town.
Nice. It must be nice to see that at the town level when you see so much of it at the state and national level kind of going the other way.
It is. It's, a lot of divisiveness, even in other communities. But we don't have that right now, and it's really due to the level-headedness of the council, the work that the department heads are doing to educate the council and making options. We know as staff that not everything we bring up to the council is going to get approved. And we know that at the end of the day, it's the council that sets the policy for the community. And that's, I think, just part of it. We have to realize that. And I think the council realizes that just because you don't agree doesn't mean you have to be disagreeable. And you don't have to, it's not personal, it's just a difference of opinion. And I think that really helps having a stable council, stable staff, and really making sure that we can move forward.
I remember one of the mantras when you first started, because I remember I attended a lot of those meetings. I think it was there for your first meeting in the audience at the time. But the mantra at the time was get the basics right.
Correct, yeah.
And because that's where we were as a town, the basics
weren't right. They weren't being done right, and that was the big problem. I mean, it was basic purchasing policies weren't in place. There was basic debt policies weren't in place, and just making sure people follow the rules. And 90% of the problems are solved when people follow the rules, and that's a big part of it. And we have to update rules and make sure they change with the times. But you're right, there was nothing in place for a lot of that. We were still running Newmarket's town government like it was 1960. And we changed in the 90s to a council manager form of government, but it was still being run like a select board administrative assistant form. And that was really gumming up the works. It was not helpful wasn't making us professional. And that's what we're trying to make sure we continue to do.
What's something that you are especially proud of here in Newmarket?
There's a few things. I think one, our investment in infrastructure. We've done a lot of work on our roads, our wastewater plants, so hopefully soon our buildings, and energy efficiencies that we've found. That those are not always the pretty things, but they're the things that are going to help the community last the longest. I think the second one would have been the community's reaction and outcome to the pandemic. We didn't have the panic or the rumors or issues that you saw in other communities because we were always honest and said this is the way it's going. We tried to address it. We didn't know. You know, it was, somebody once told me we were trying to build a plane while flying it, because nobody really gone through that before. And the community stood up and said, no, let's get through this. So I think that was another thing. And finally, I'm proud of the department heads and the staff. We have very little turnover for a community of our size, and especially in our area. There's other communities exactly our size, same demographic, and they lose employees all the time that I hear about. And a lot of it's because of the leadership of the department heads and how much people who work here enjoy working for the town of Newmarket.
How long have some of these folks been around? Like, that surprise you?
Gosh, 30, 40 years. I'm still, you know, until recently I was the newest upper level management staff, and I'm 10 years, which is very rare. You know, the chiefs have been here for forever, even if not in the position, but in the community, as well as most other positions. So, I mean, we have had some turnover recently, but that was due to retirements. It wasn't due to, you know, I'm moving on somewhere else. It was because people have been here enough that they earned their retirement time.
I know you mentioned that some of the things that you're proud of aren't necessarily the sexy things, and I was actually talking with somebody else about some of the infrastructure changes, because those have been very kind of big and visible. Can you say a little bit about some of the larger infrastructure projects that you think have been pretty impactful and have really benefited the town? Yeah,
I mean, I don't think people realize how old the infrastructure actually is until you see it. Most of the pipes that are being replaced is from the 1890s. We're replacing those, so hopefully they'll last the same amount of time. But it's giving us a modern water system. The wastewater plant was from, I believe, the mid-'80s and was not meeting environmental standards, which now it does. And we continuously be a model for other communities on how to dispose of the waste after. And again, that's not the sexy part, but it's a part of the job. And I think the other thing is we never had a real roads plan before, probably about 5-10 years ago. It was just, okay, we have this amount of money, let's do this, versus here's the priority for the roads we need to get done. And we can pull out the plan, which we are now in the process of updating because we've done enough, and say, look, this is where your road's going to be, and this is the reason why. Because you always hear the reason that, oh, you're paving that road because so-and-so lives on it, or this is the reason. And no, there's a reasoning behind it. So those are some of the things, things I hope to be able to do soon. We need to address Town Hall. It's, you know, it's an old Catholic school, and you still see the bones of it. It's good bones, but we need to make sure the space is here for what government's going to look like in the next 100 years. The library does need to be addressed as well at some point in time. That, you know, the library of the 80s is not the library of the 2020s. It's more of a community learning center than is just a place to take out books. So I think that's another area to look at. The other thing is, and you know, while we may not be directly involved on the town side, is that we finally addressed the school issues. I mean, I knew that issue well before I came into Newmarket. And it took time, and I think it was, you know, we helped by explaining things and the impact on the town side and what the benefit of fixing the schools were going to be to the community as a whole, for economic development, for valuation of homes, for just the well-being of the community. So those are some of the things I think we've really worked to address.
I think working on that school issue really helped to ease the divisiveness that you talked about earlier too. So back to sort of some of those infrastructure projects, and I think the town in general and how we operate as a community, but also just as an enterprise, right? Yeah. We've been really fortunate to do things in a cost-effective manner, and being really conscientious about the burden to taxpayers.
Absolutely.
And it's something that, we have to talk about as
Right.
council and certainly as town management. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know that people really understand the sometimes shoestring budget that we operate under.
So I think that was one of the things when I got to town, that everybody thought we had this bloated budget, and the council at the time asked for an independent study on our operations, and the consultants came in and said, not only is your budget not bloated, you're seriously thin on staff and on funding, that if something were to happen in some departments, the department would shut down. And so we started working to address that, but we also knew that, it's still pretty much a blue-collar community. It's a bedroom community for the greater Seacoast, and that a lot of people, this is where they built their first homes, where they bought their first homes, or on the flip side, they're retiring to the community because we're close enough to Portsmouth, Boston, Dover, that they can get the services, but they can still live a quiet life. So we always took that into consideration when doing budgets and how we're going to finance things. We've always looked at trying to stretch the dimes that we have and the nickels that we have made in fund balance to offset the expenses. And, really before we go forward with anything for any debt that's going to be issued, we make sure that this is what we have all the information and that it makes sense. As for operating budgets, we just started adding new staff for the first time in probably 15, 20 years. This last couple of years. We added a new police officer, I believe, since the 90s last year, and we added a town engineer position, which was the first new department head position in many, many years, to assist with a lot of the planning and try to save money in the long run. So the town government is very lean. Again, some say almost to a fault, but we manage, and that's the important thing. And we accomplish the things we need to do. We get the roads paved. We do projects that we need to. A lot from grants, like as we said, wastewater, water, sewer. The downtown project that we did a few years ago, we installed the splash pad without using tax dollars. There's a lot of things that we're able to work together to determine other ways to do it.
So just a couple of maybe little lighter questions.
Sure.
So what's something that no one would guess about your job as town manager?
Good question. I think that people don't realize that it is a 24/7, 365 day-a-year job. I've been going through things, and yes, I get texts on Christmas Day of accidents in vehicles. There was a few years ago, we had an ice storm 2 days before Thanksgiving, and we didn't have power. So I'm working on it. We've had blizzards on Christmas Day. I've had been called out for police actions on the 4th of July. But usually it's just, communications, and we're doing it all the time. The other thing is that I don't think people realize how much we actually touch in people's lives either. People are so involved in politics and government on the federal and somewhat state level, they don't realize that we actually have a bigger impact on their life than those levels do. People don't, whether or not the President of the United States makes a decision on how something's going to be funded versus whether or not we on the local level determine if your road's going to get paved or the road plow gets out there, you're going to notice that on that level more than what's going to happen in Washington. So I think people don't realize that how much of impact local government has on their life. And I completely enjoy it. I would rather, on my side I get to also see the reward faster. I get to see the citizens happy because something is done. I get to help somebody who has an issue when they call and they come into the town hall. For personally, that's a selfishness. I get to see the reward quicker. So I think that's really part of it.
So sort of on a similar vein, are there, what's an assumption that people might make about the town manager's job that you want to debunk?
To be honest, I don't think a lot of people know what I do. I think if they lived in town government for so long, they think that we still have a board of selectmen who's sitting somewhere once a week making all the decisions, or if they're not involved in government, they assume there may be a mayor sitting there somewhere making decisions. I think that's one of the big things is trying to explain the council manager form of government in how we're really set up like a modern corporation. A board of directors is elected by the shareholders, which is the people, who elect the council, who then hire a CEO, who runs the day-to-day of the community. Council sets policy, we enact the policy that the council gives us, and goes from there. So I think that's, to be honest, that was one of the big issues when I first got to Newmarket. I don't think we didn't follow the model that we're supposed to. And now we're starting to do that a lot more, that people are starting to learn that factor as well.
I think people think you're the mayor.
Sometimes I get that, yeah. But I do what the council says, yes.
Right. Looking forward, what would you like your legacy to be in Newmarket?
I think, it's always make the community better than when you received it. And I think we have come very far in the last 10 years, but I think it's time for us to go the next step. We're no longer little Newmarket on the other side of the bay. We're now a destination for many people. There's many times I go throughout the state and they say, oh, we heard about X, Y, and Z going on in your community. And my legacy is now, okay, we've done the downtown, we've done the mills, what's next? It's time to start looking at next. I don't want to rest on our laurels of just that, because we'll get stagnant. But I think it's like, okay, what do we want to look like in the next 30, 40 years? Well past our time. And I think that's my legacy. I'd like to start looking at that.
Do you have a sense of where we're headed?
I feel that we're going to be, which I think a lot of the general Seacoast area is that we're balancing the new with the old. But we need to start focus. For so long, we focused on the past, which is fine. It's good. But it's time for us to start looking at new things as well. We need to be more open to growing our community, and as well as different kind of development in the community. I think that you're going to see a lot more people who are young professionals coming back to this community after, Portsmouth had the boom for so long, Dover had their boom. Well, they can't afford that anymore, or they want to start growing families. And we're better suited for that, especially with the improvements that we've made over the last few years. I also see us being here for the retired and the seniors, that we're a walkable community that offers the services they need here without having to drive on major highways or distances to get basic services. And I think that's another thing to look at. And I think finally is we are still, in comparison, I'm not saying this is the market's the market, but we are still a place where people start out. We're a place, we are 65% rental, so people start out in this community, and that helps grow our community and be more unique. And I think we're continuously embracing that knowledge, that idea that, yes, we have people who've been in the community for 50 plus years, but we also have people who've been in the community for 5 or 10 or less who are also impacting community just as much. And I think that's an important thing, and I feel like we're embracing it more, those people who are, for lack of a better term, outsiders. But we also understand that their investment in the community is just as important as the long-term residents.
We appreciate the work that you're doing.
I appreciate the community and letting me be here for 10 years. It's been really an honor and I love the community very much, and can't wait to be here for the next 10.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your service, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for your time today.
Thank you.